Good morning. It's a joy to welcome everyone to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Harford County. Our building is situated on the native lands of the Susquehannock people, and we hope to move beyond mere acknowledgement to action that will promote greater understanding of Indigenous peoples' concerns and rights. I'm Reverend Jay Brooks. My pronouns are she, her, and leading this worship service with me today is Worship Associate Valerie Green, our Director of Faith Formation, Jen Blosser, and at the piano, the dazzling Brenna Kupferman.
Good morning. Happy Cinco de Mayo. We gather each Sunday morning on site and online to share in life's meaning, grow in care and community, and open our hearts and minds to the sacred truth known by many names.
We gather in community to restore the balance of our spirits, to celebrate the joys of life and find the strength to meet our sorrows. And in the earliest meaning of the word worship, to consider ideas that are worthy of our time and attention.
Unitarian Universalism is a religious tradition that values diversity and embraces the wisdom of all faiths. We use science, reason, and gifts of the Spirit to explore life's mystery and meaning.
In this tradition, we know that people need not think alike to love alike.
Whatever your heritage, however your history, and whomever you love, you are welcome here.
This month's learning and worship theme is pluralism. Today, we explore unity in diversity, the idea from about 500 years ago that shared values allow people with differing theological views to worship together as one faith. But our service this morning isn't so much about the history as it is about how we actually live that idea from the inside out, so that unity in diversity is more than a slogan. It's how we are with each other. Now may the sound of the bell and the words and music of the song Stand Together center us as we enter into a time of worship.
Something has happened in love, holding it won't let go of us now. Something here is calling us forward, upward motion, where drops in one ocean roll on. Will you rise up with me today? Lift up your voice and boldly sing. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Live a dream of a highest calling, be the hope of a new day dawning. We're the ones who can make a difference. Let's stand together. Share your gifts with the world that's waiting for a change that we're all creating. It's a moment for us. Let's stand together. Every day's a chance you can do something amazing, to feel your passion blazing and shine. Yeah, playing with every vision and dance in new directions, exploding new heights in your mind. I will rise up with you today. Lift up my voice and boldly sing. We are the ones we've been waiting to.
You're not even in the picture, but I guess that's all right if you don't want to be.
Live the dream of your highest calling, be
Scoot
the
over
hope
this way.
of a new day dawning. We're the ones who can make a
You gotta
difference.
turn it.
Let's stand together. Show a gift with the world that's waiting for a change that we're all creating. It's a moment for our greatness. Let's stand together now. Hey, hey, hey. One voice, one heart, one world,
Grandma, pick a card.
one dream, one voice, one heart, world.
Okay, I'm gonna put this randomly in the deck. I said I'm gonna put this randomly in the deck. Now it's in the deck.
You need to be quiet though.
With the dream of your highest calling, with the hope of a new day. We're the ones who can make a difference. Let's stand together. Share your gift with the world that's waiting for a change that we're creating. It's a moment for our greatness. Let's stand together. Live your dream of a highest calling. Be the hope of a new day dawning. We're the ones who can make a difference. Let's stand together. Share your gift with the world that's waiting for a change that we're creating. It's a moment for our greatness. Let's stand together. One voice, one heart, one voice, one dream, one heart. Let's stand together.
Each Sunday, we light the chalice of our religious heritage. We do this for our ancestors who taught us through their various religious traditions and by their actions for justice and hope. We do this for our children who are learning the traditions we teach and who learn more from our actions than our words.
We do this also for our children. We do this also for ourselves as we consider who we have been and what we are becoming as we spread our wings to arrive at that place where we will go. I'm sorry, I left out that paragraph.
Okay.
Our call to worship this morning is about spirituality. And spirituality is a topic that's worthy of our time and attention. It's an important topic to those in this fellowship. So the call to worship this morning is from researcher and storyteller Brene Brown. It's a comment about spirituality from her book, Atlas of the Heart. Brown says, I define spirituality as the deeply held belief that we are inextricably connected to each other by something greater than ourselves. I have friends who are atheists who every day practice inextricable connection. They hurt when others hurt, and they know that none of us is free until all of us are free. I have friends who talk endlessly about religion and wear scripture on their t-shirts and yet demonstrate no connection to anyone else's suffering but their own, and maybe that of people in their immediate circle. I make this point because we're not talking about religion here. We're talking about the irrepressible human spirit. So as we here today consider the irrepressible human spirit and the connections that true spirituality offers, let's sing together hymn number 1023, Building Bridges. And you may rise or remain seated as is comfortable. Brenna has some special instructions for us.
Ew.
So we're going to divide up so we can do this as a round. And the easiest way to do that is just what you say. So this group is going to be group number one. You're number one. This group is group A. And anybody who's sitting towards the back or doesn't want to be one or A. Hashtag, all right? We're going to sing it all together. Then we're going to start with group one, singing along at the beginning. And then group A will sing following that, and I'll tell you when to come in. And then group hashtag will come in and go to. I think we do have some words to put up on.
We do. And we will sing this all together. All right, so we're going to start. Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all voices and all visions, friends we could make such sweet harmony.
Building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, you reach out to me. Voices and all our visions. Such building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all our voices and all of our visions, and make such sweet harmony. Friends, make such sweet harmony.
Please be seated. Today's Time for All Ages is based on an illustrated story called Cultivating Meaningful Connection in Brene Brown's 2021 book, Atlas of the Heart. We're going to watch a scene in an office play out. A boss is checking in with one of her employees to see how her recent big presentation went. Now, this boss is supportive of folks on her team. She's encouraging and she believes in them. But as we watch this scene unfold, we'll see how the way that the boss engages with the employee can make a real difference in whether their connection is a meaningful one.
So, how'd your presentation go? It went okay. Oh, why just okay? I stayed up all night planning for it. This was my big moment and just didn't feel right.
Now, there's obviously something going on, but the boss might feel uncomfortable or might not want to get involved, so she might try to avoid the deeper narrative, the deeper discussion, and tap out of the narrative with a platitude like this.
Oh, I'm sure it was great. Hey, what time's our next meeting?
Oh. But what if, despite her discomfort, the boss instead tried to cultivate meaningful connection? Here's how it might go.
Say more. Help me understand what didn't feel right. You worked so hard when putting it together. Why did it feel weird?
I'm really glad you asked that. It was almost like I was talking to myself. No one was even looking at me or making eye contact. It was like I was in the room by myself.
Now, the boss might be feeling a little prickle of discontent about where this narrative is going. It might be tempting again to tap out of the narrative like this.
Yeah, sometimes we feel like that when we give talks. I think it was just all the pressure to try and impress everyone. Anyway, I'll see you at noon for the next meeting. Yeah?
Then again, what if the boss instead chose to cultivate meaningful connection like this?
Wait, are you saying that you gave this presentation, which you've been working on for months, and you felt invisible there?
Yes, that is exactly the word I would use, invisible. I know I was the only woman in the room, but even as I was making the presentation, nobody asked me any questions. They kept looking over at Brad instead of me. Afterwards, when people said, "Good job," they were just saying it into the space or to each other. I just felt really deflated.
Now the issue is on the table. If this is the point where things become too uncomfortable for the boss, she might say something that effectively takes over the narrative and tries to explain away the behavior while again trying to sound supportive with a platitude.
Well, you sound a little sensitive about this. Don't you think you might be exaggerating a bit? Even I feel kind of sensitive about giving big presentations. I'm sure you did a great job. You worked so hard. Forget about it. Don't worry.
Ouch. That hurt. Let's go back to what it might look like if instead the boss tried to cultivate a meaningful connection.
Okay, let me make sure I'm understanding what happened. You gave this presentation. No one made eye contact with you. They asked Brad the follow-up questions, and then they didn't even thank you.
In this response, we can see that the boss really cares. It matters to her that the employee was treated this way. The boss really wants to support her, but even this support can still lead to an unsupportive takeover of the employee's story, like this.
That is totally unacceptable. I'm calling these men into my office right now, and we're going to have a come to Jesus moment. Nobody treats my people on my team like that. I'm 100% on your side.
At this point, the employee might not say, but might be thinking,
Whoa, you did not even ask me what I need. You just jumped straight into fixing things, and now you feel great. You get to be the hero, but I'm still here and I'm not fully being heard.
but if the boss is really focused on cultivating meaningful connection, she might handle the situation this way.
I think invisibility is one of the most painful experiences I've ever had in my life. My gut says we need to address this head on, but I want to think about what support looks like for you. More importantly, how can I support you in addressing this? I'm sorry that happened. I know how good your presentation was and all the effort that you put into it.
And now, at the end of this scene, after the boss has made a real attempt to cultivate meaningful connection, how is the employee feeling?
Because she took time with me and really listened, because she was willing to witness my pain, I feel seen and heard. I don't feel disempowered. I feel supported.
And how does the boss feel?
Building trust and being empathetic meant centering the employee's experience over my own discomfort. It was hard to really accompany her when she was feeling pain. I had to really see her, and I had to let myself be the learner and not the knower.
We both had to be vulnerable.
We both had to be brave.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Each Sunday, we receive an offering to support the mission of this congregation. Here we intentionally welcome the pluralism of the theological beliefs and seek to learn from one another. We care for those within this fellowship and extend our care into the wider community through actions for love and justice, which no matter how small we work towards the transformation of our world. Your contributions allow this congregation to reach out to all who seek a life-affirming message of love and hope. If you're online, click the link in the Zoom chat to make a contribution. If you're on site, you may place a donation in the basket or use your device to find the link on uufhc.net or on the fellowship app. Whatever method of giving you choose, your generosity helps to grow a healthier, more joyful UU community, and in keeping with our religious heritage, to draw the circle of love and justice a little bit wider.
In this worship service that invites us to lean even more deeply into our mission as Unitarian Universalists, we also renew our connection and our commitment as a community to respond to one another out of deep care. Now is the time to share briefly a joy, a sorrow, a gratitude, something you carry deeply within your heart this morning. If you're on site in the sanctuary, please come to the front and speak into the microphone while Valerie lights a candle. If you're on Zoom, put in the chat the message you'd like to share, and Brenna will read it as Valerie lights a candle. A few gentle reminders. This isn't a time for announcements or politics. Please do say your first name and do share from your heart and from your own experiences. And be mindful not to share anyone else's experience unless you have their express permission to do so. Would anyone like to share?
To be humble, to be kind. It is a giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend. To give in such a way that has no end. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are one. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. To be bold, to be brave. It is a thinking that the heart can still be saved. And the darkness can come quick. The danger's in the anger and the hanging on to it. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are one. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. And tell me what it is that you see. A world that's full of endless possibilities. Heroes don't look like they used to. They look like you do. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are one. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. We are how we treat each other.
Our reading today is from Brene Brown again in her 2021 book, Atlas of the Heart. Our connection with others can only be as deep as our connection with ourselves. If I don't know or understand who I am or what I need, want, and believe, I can't share myself with you. I need to be connected to myself in my own body and learning what makes me work. This is how I start to develop the grounded confidence I need to move through the world and cultivate meaning and connections with others. Before this work, I didn't give enough importance to spending time and energy connecting to myself. I made that optional if I had anything left after connecting with others. It wasn't working, and now I know why. In this life, we will know and bear witness to incredible sorrow and anguish, and we will experience breathless love and joy. There will be boring days and exciting moments, low-grade disappointment and seething anger, and there will be wonder and confusion. The wild and ever-changing nature of emotions and experiences leaves our hearts stretched marked and strong, worn and willing. My hope is that we will find that solid ground within us, that shore that offers safe harbor when we're feeling untethered and adrift. The more confident we are about being able to navigate to that place, the more daring will be our adventures, and the more connected we will be to ourselves and to each other. The real gift of learning the language of emotion, practicing the work, and cultivating meaningful connection is being able to go anywhere without the fear of getting lost. Even when we have no idea where we are or where we're going, with the right map, we can find our way back to our heart and our truest self. And now our hymn 10, 4.
No,
Oh,
no,
I'm sorry.
No, I get to preach a
Oh, you
sermon.
get to preach that. That was what I was doing.
We could just stop there, really. So, but I actually really have something I want to share with you today, more than I usually do even, which is quite a lot usually. I was surprised when I read Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, from which so many of our readings have come today. I was surprised to learn that she and her team of researchers, she's a sociologist, a full professor at the University of Houston, and she leads a team of researchers who do qualitative research on many things, including emotions. She and her team have identified 87 separate emotions. 87. Now, I've always been taught that there are really only 6 or 7 emotions. And yet, after this extensive review of other studies and conversations with thousands of people from all different walks of life, 87. Brown's idea is that to cultivate meaningful connection with other people, we humans need to learn to name these different emotions. More than that, we need to understand them so that we know what may lie behind the different emotions we see around us or that we feel inside, what these emotions arise from, and what they might mean. I was skeptical. I read the whole book, some of it more than once because I listened to the audiobook of much of it, and then I went back to the printed text many times for better comprehension. And now I get it. I'm a believer. Enough so that I might even be willing to lead a discussion of the book. The book, of course, is called Atlas of the Heart, and that's because it's like a map of human emotions, a map, a guide. So when I think about what we try to do here in this fellowship and in Unitarian Universalist congregations generally, I'm humbled yet again at the magnitude of the task. For about 500 years, beginning with the Protestant Reformation, the people who were our religious ancestors have been saying that it's possible to have unity in diversity. that if we share the same values, we can thrive as a religious community, even though specific beliefs may differ, as they do. There are probably as many different religious beliefs in this room as there are people, and some people may hold 2 or 3 not entirely consistent religious thoughts. I do. So this is a challenging idea to live by, unity in diversity. I've served many Unitarian Universalist congregations in my capacity as a specialist in transition ministry. And I've seen the many ways that congregations are unique and also how many times similar patterns appear. I'm sure you're all ahead of me now. Yes, one of the common patterns is getting along when we have different perspectives. Now, unity and diversity used to mean theological diversity. What's that old saying? To be polite at the dinner table, don't discuss religion or politics. The idea of unity and diversity is actually based on the idea that we should discuss religion. We can listen to each other, learn from each other, and grow our own souls. I admit to being thoroughly marinated in the idea that to thrive as individuals and as a community, we must learn to listen to each other, to be willing to learn from one another, and when that happens, to recognize the growth that emerges from the process. But 87 emotions. I'm not sure why, but as I was thinking about all those emotions and what each might have to teach me, I remembered a humorous essay I read a couple of years ago. It's from a little book of essays by the poet Ross Gay. The essay is about being in a buffet line, and it's about the feeling of annoyance. Now I know, and I didn't at the time I first read the essay, that annoyance is a version of the emotion anger. It's in between irritation and the more intense feeling we would name as anger. But all the same, it's a type of anger. It might even be a precursor to the outburst of anger that happens. You start with annoyance, right, and then can move to anger very quickly. Think of road rage. A succession of little annoyances on a crowded highway after a stressful day might well lead to anger and even to what we call road rage. What happens internally when we feel annoyed? Ross Gay sums it up very well in his delightful essay. He was talking about the people going through the buffet line at the restaurant, and they were going the wrong way. There was, he said, a burbling in his reservoir of annoyance. In his words, his sad little annoyance monster dubbed this behavior wretched incivility and imminent plummet into lawlessness and misery. Going the wrong way in the buffet line. It's a buffet line. And yet his own sense of what is orderly, correct, civilized, bubbled up as a kind of self-righteousness that he named as his sad little annoyance monster. Once he recognized his inner annoyance monster, what does Ross do? He hops into line with all the other deviants, as he puts it, and they all got their food just fine. Brene Brown might say that Ross Gay's ability to name his annoyance, to reflect speedily on his emotion, to put his annoyance into perspective, a buffet line, not the end of civilization, enabled him, empowered him to manage his emotions and enjoy his dinner. This little story, the mental exercise that Ross Gay went through when he noticed his first tinglings of annoyance, is in a nutshell what each individual human being must do if we are to be successful in this project of ours, this Unitarian Universalist project of unity in diversity. Our Unitarian forebears had felt the tingling of annoyance and even anger for nearly 300 years when people called them Unitarians. Yep. And let's remember that religious annoyance that builds into anger can lead to a kind of road rage. Although back in the 1500s and 1600s, the Unitarians were more often the recipients of road rage rather than the perpetrators. But still, it was in 1819, 205 years ago, on May 5th, in fact, this exact day in 1819, that the magnificent preacher and theologian William Ellery Channing reflected on the annoyance of repeatedly being sneered at as a Unitarian and preached a sermon in Baltimore, a sermon that has become famous, in which he claimed the name Unitarian with pride for the first time. Now, this is a little bit like, William Ellery Channing deciding he's going to just jump in with all the other deviants into the buffet line and go the direction they're going. They're going to call us Unitarians. We're Unitarians. And here's what that means. That's what his sermon was about. And as an aside, it is a very old argument in religion as to whether God is one being, or more than one being. Jews and Muslims who, like Christians, trace their religious heritage back to Abraham would say one. Many Christians, for a long time and today, assert the idea of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The early Unitarians noticed that the Trinity is not actually a biblical doctrine. In the 1500s, they were actually reading the Bible for the first time instead of being told about it. So when they saw that it wasn't a biblical doctrine and said so, that got them into a lot of trouble with whole swaths of Christianity. Now, the interesting thing here is that Unitarians didn't then and don't now insist on God not being a Trinity. Basically, their point was that we should not argue and divide over the issue. This attitude was one that many people, including some kings, found annoying to the point of road rage. Now, I have a lot of admiration for William Ellery Channing and his ability to manage his annoyance at what was intended as derision, a deliberate misunderstanding of the point, because the point wasn't insistence on any particular theological belief, but on the authority of the individual human being to relate to God or not in accordance with their own conscience. The framework for the idea of conscience is the values that we hold in common. In saying, yes, call me a Unitarian, Channing turned an insult into a symbol for the willingness to allow others to engage in religious exploration, to use reason and tradition and the gifts of the Spirit to find their own spiritual path. It's pluralism, which I might call a willingness to coexist with others who have a diversity of beliefs. Now, one challenge that we and others who assert the possibility of unity and diversity is the increasing diversity that has become evident in society and in our congregations, not just theological diversity, but diversity of opinions of all kinds and ethnic and cultural diversity. Which brings me back to Atlas of the Heart. To live our values with integrity and to engage with each other so that we all thrive, we need to learn not just how to manage our own emotions, but how to cultivate meaningful connections with others. And cultivating meaningful connections seems to me to be the great human skill. As I was listening to the audiobook version of Atlas of the Heart, I resonated with the story of the boss and the employee and the difficulty of being fully present with suffering. Now, this challenge is a common one for ministers, not the boss-employee setting, but many settings where the minister is in conversation with someone who is suffering. But it's also a common experience for anyone who hopes to be a caring and empathetic person. Being present to the pain of others and allowing them the space to talk about it or not is central to meaningful connection. So they might talk about it, they might not want to talk about it. It's up to them. But holding that space is important. And that means, for me, decentering myself, turning the lens of my heart to the other person, the real human being before me, and engaging my empathy. It's often difficult, and I often fail to do it well. Now, one of the things I think we probably all realize is that as hard as it can be to hold the space for someone's pain, it's actually both harder and even more important when the person we're with has a social location that's unlike our own. Let me unpack that a little bit. So as I was listening to the audiobook with the story involving the boss and the employee, and I was seeing it in my mind's eye, I imagined, as you saw this morning with our two main characters, a boss and employee who were both white women. This is my mind's eye, right? This is how I think. It was there. But when I looked at the book, I saw there was an illustrated story, right? And the employee was a person of color. The boss was a white woman. And I had this moment of, did my mind just erase people of color who I might be in conversation with because I thought strictly about white people? Yes, it did. I did. I erased a whole swath of people because I was going directly to what was most familiar to me. And it doesn't matter what our social location is. Sometimes because of race and gender and culture and economic wealth, the kind of jobs we have, how we're situated as, whether we're a supervisor or someone who is being supervised, we may all be in different social locations. We're not always the boss. We're not always the person who is given the most deference in a conversation. And at other times, we may be the person who receives that deference. So it's important to recognize that when we're in a conversation with someone whose social location is different from our own, we have to be especially attentive and aware of the fact that we do not know what is actually going on inside the person. We may be able to recognize pain. We may be able to overcome our discomfort in holding space for that pain. We may be able to be there, but we don't always respond in ways that are actually effective in building meaningful connection. And that's especially true when we're people in different social locations. So I thought about that. And I thought, well, this is an important lesson for me. And I thought I might share it with you. Maybe it will be meaningful to you. And I remembered something that happened when I was studying for ministry. And one of the things I was interested in was ethics. And I was interested also in the ethics of conversation, which is kind of a long circular historic way to come back to where we are, which is conversational ethics include doing things that will cultivate meaningful connections with others. And so here, 25 years later, I'm reading a book that brings me back to the time when I was studying ethical conversations. And I actually taught a workshop about it at a Unitarian Universalist conference. But let me back up and I'll tell you about the young man. Jaime was a friend of my daughter's. Jaime was Latino, brown skin. My daughter is Korean American. She has brown skin. Okay. So they were experiencing every day being in a different location, social location from the predominantly white people in our area. And in school, that meant the predominantly white group of teachers. So one day they came back from school together and told me this terrible story that Jaime, who was very good in math, he was about 15 at that time, maybe. He had been challenged by his teacher when he got an A on a math test as having cheated. And the teacher, a white man, insisted that Jaime retake the exam. It was actually a different test, so he could somehow remember the answers. While only the teacher was in the room and Jaime was alone. So Jaime retook the exam and he got another A. So this was so painful for Jaime because, first of all, he was receiving the message, you can't possibly be good in math. And that's a terrible message for anyone to receive. And the other message was, I think you're a cheater. And even when he got an A on the test where he couldn't possibly have cheated because the teacher was there the whole time, the teacher was grudging and said something like, okay, maybe you just lucked out. So this is terrible, right? I'm glad you made that noise. It's really terrible, really terrible. And so I asked the kids if they would be willing to share some of the stories about what had happened to them in this conference where I was teaching this little workshop on ethical conversation. And they thought about it and they knew it was going to be a little bit of a challenge. It would be a mostly white group of people, but they said they would do it. They were really brave. So the story about Jaime and the math test was one of the little topics, which then people went off in small groups to discuss. So it felt like the workshop went pretty well, but afterwards somebody was lingering until everyone, including the two teenagers, was out of the room and came back to me and said, I have one serious objection to the way you led this workshop. And I said, what was that? He said, you didn't use true stories. You used things you made up. Like that teenager in the math test, that's something you made up and he told him to say. Because like I had actually said to them, all these stories are true. But obviously that didn't sink in. The idea, here was the idea that I had cheated, right? I had made up the story about the math test and then somehow inveigled this poor teenager into relating it to all these people. You know, that was just horrible. And then the bottom line was that all of the things that the person was saying came out of not being able to believe that what had happened to Jaime had happened to Jaime. He rejected it. It wasn't within his experience of teachers. You know, he was along with the teacher, you must have lucked out. You know, that was the best spin to put on it. But it was, these were Unitarian Universalists. This man who talked to me afterwards was a Unitarian Universalist. And that story has troubled me ever since. That experience has troubled me ever since. And I want to say, listening to Brene Brown and going back and rereading sections of the book, think about the world today. If we here in this room and on Zoom today are not committed to cultivating meaningful connection with one another, how in the world, literally, can the world ever reach the point where we can really listen to and hear one another, where we can sit with somebody else's pain and hold the space for them and say things like, I want to support you. tell me what support would look like to you. I mean, that's a game changer. But it's not what we're usually taught. We say, there, or I'm so sorry. And all of that is fine, right? But the bottom line is to make the space, to hold the space for the person to say what it is that they need. And this is going to be a challenge for us with people who are like us, who are in the same social location. It's going to be a challenge, a special challenge for when we're talking with people who are not in the same social location, especially if we're the one who has sort of an expectation of greater deference in the situation than the other person. So we have to be savvy about difference. And difference is not the same as diversity. I think the insight that I've had over the last couple of years is that to talk about someone being different implies that there's a standard, a norm that's widely understood. It may be that the inevitable first stage of welcoming diversity, of engaging meaningfully with diversity, is to say, I'm normal, but you're not, but I will tolerate you. Ugh. So that sentiment is clearly dreadful, not something I ever want to be in the position of saying or thinking. And as we move ourselves in various settings with various different people, from this idea of coexistence or tolerance to really embracing, cherishing the diversity that exists among us and among humanity, we have this opportunity to cultivate meaningful connection. We have to leave behind the dominance and supremacy of this is normal, because that this is normal for me comes only from my own accustomed social location, my background and experiences, the culture as I have learned it. And all of that in me is not going, but it's not that I'm normal and others are different. It's that we're human beings, we're diverse, and to cherish that diversity. Cherish it enough that we sit with something that might be uncomfortable or painful, where we really aren't sure we're doing the right thing or saying the right thing, but to hold the space for the person to tell us what they've experienced and to believe their experience. We have to do that. And I think as Unitarian Universalists, we have a special responsibility to do it, because we are the ones who say that we can have unity and diversity. We're the ones who say we will engage with each other's diversity so that we learn more and grow our own souls. This is part of our identity as Unitarian Universalists. And it means being able to listen, to be fully present, to be open to others, to hold the space. It's not easy. And I love this quote. This quote is from Brené Brown. I'm going to have to read this book again too, let me just say. But her advice is, stay awkward, brave, and kind. Amen. So now let's sing hymn number 1014. Rise or remain seated as is comfortable. 1014, answering the call of love. And we're using the phrase answering the call of love at the request of the composer. It's printed in a hymnal as standing on the side of love, but it's a recognition of the diversity of people who are among us and who may not be as comfortable standing as others. So answering the call of love.
The promise of the Spirit Faith, hope, and love abide. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
Please be seated. Our benediction, the sweetness of how we talk, is from 13th century Sufi Muslim poet Rumi. And I hope this is true of us. We are a warm spell that comes in a relentless winter. We are the sun with all the different kinds of light. The soul has been given its own ears to hear things that the mind does not understand. The sweetness of how we talk together is what we bring to the world. May it be so. Now we extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These are in our hearts. They are the light we carry out into all the world. Amen.